What's good, everybody? It's the Cloud with Cab Show. UFC 303 was iconic. Shout out to Alex Pereira. Probably the pound-for-pound #1 right now. He's the hottest fighter. He's been fighting so much in the past 2 or 3 years in the UFC, and he's relatively new in the UFC, like 7 or 8 fights in. This is unheard of to be the 185er title holder to the 205 light heavyweight title holder. It's crazy, but Alex Pereira really is that guy. He is that animal. He is that guy to really transcend this sport in a new level. I mean, we look at Alex Pereira's game and realize, wow, there's a lot of holes to be filled in his game. Obviously, his ground game's terrible. He's one takedown away from losing his light heavyweight championship belt. Like, that's insane, right? But Alex Pereira, he just possesses that aura. He has that ability to knock you out from a short range, and we saw it against Yuri. We really did. He threw that leg kick and just connected, and he literally was knocked out on the leg kick. And I look at Herb Dean and be like, bro, like, you almost killed Yuri. Like, he was already out after the leg kick. Like, he should have been stopped right then and there. Then we saw Pereira throw some big haymakers at the end, but it was like those were unnecessary. And a lot of people were like, oh, those were back of the head shots. And it was like that was on a scramble, and Yuri was already out from the leg kick. So Herb Dean's job was to stop that fight like 5 seconds before it even got stopped. So it was like crazy, right? But Alex Pereira, a lot of people are talking about him moving up to heavyweight. I mean, that would be a reality check for Alex Pereira. If he does move up to heavyweight, you have to go through the GOAT, John Jones, and we know how that's going to go. We already know how this fight's going to go. John Jones is going to take Alex Pereira down and submit him or utilize his ground and pound. We look at Alex Pereira's holes, and his huge hole in his game is his grappling and wrestling. He cannot wrestle or grapple. So it's like those type of guys, you have to shoot for takedowns. And he's eventually going to fight a wrestler. That's what's going to happen. I mean, we look at Pereira and realize, man, like, he had a hurt toe after this, all this other stuff, but Alex Pereira got the job done. He really is that guy. You know, he looks like a, 10,000 BC type of character where they come out straight from the jungle. Like, this guy is really it, dude. He looks like a serial killer. He's cold-blooded. That's who Alex Pereira is, and he has freaking bombs in his both left and right hands, and that's what he does. But what's next for Pereira? That's a huge question. He could do all different types of things. He could stay at light heavyweight, defend his belt, or he can move up to heavyweight and try to really fight the GOAT, John Jones. I think the UFC would do big numbers. It would do big business if Dana White and the UFC came up with the Alex Pereira versus John Jones sometimes early next year. I would love to see that fight. I think a lot of the MMA fans would love to see that fight, but I think the fight would be kind of one-dimensional. I think John Jones would take him down, and it'd be kind of a relatively easy fight. It really would. I just think, looking at Pereira, yes, he has a great stand-up game, great kickboxer, all these accolades, but there are holes in Alex Pereira's game, but I think he's going to work on those type of holes. I really do. So shout out to Alex Pereira getting the job done. I told you guys to go knock out in Alex Pereira. That bet hit, cashed in, ching, another easy check. And you're not breaking your back for that. You're not breaking your back for somebody else. You're literally making these easy bets that I'm telling you to make you a millionaire in today's day and age. It's 2024. This is the best time to become a millionaire if you come from nothing. Like, this is great. This is a time where I told you to bet on Alex Pereira by knockout, put your mortgage on it, put everything you own on it, and bet it all on Alex Pereira. And he cashed out, and he made it look easy. He really did. In the first round, it was light work. 49 total strikes for Pereira to Yuri's 7 total strikes. It was just pure domination. So shout out to Alex Pereira getting another job done. 2 knockdowns and 1 knockout. Shout out to Alex Pereira for the main event. Let's go! And then we had Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez. Brian Ortega ended up pulling out because he had a fever over 100 degrees. His coochie hurt. It was dried up. It was just like, really? If I'm Ortega, it's like, come on, bro. This was the pivotal right here. You're the co-main event UFC 303 because Conor McGregor pulled out because he had a toe injury. He's not 100% in the sport right now. And it's just like, Brian Ortega, how are you going to ruin this? But shout out to Dan Egan. He came in on a day's notice. Literally that same morning, Dan got a call, and he said, hey, do you want to fight Diego Lopez at catchweight 165? This is your opportunity. That morning of the fight, he said, you know what? Let's go. Let's fight. And really, yes, Diego Lopez won by decision, but we look at Dan, he had 67 total strikes to Diego Lopez's 90 total strikes. So it's a relatively closer fight, even though Diego Lopez won the fight. Shout out to Lopez. I think Lopez was going to run right through Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega kind of is like a one-dimensional fighter, a great submission guy. He can take you down, do crazy submissions, but his stand-up game is trash. And we saw that in the Max Holloway fight. He got pieced up by Max Holloway. Max Holloway literally during the exchange was holding his hand and like, hey, this is how you punch, bro. Like, that's how you do it. So Brian Ortega, I'm like really disappointed in him. I'm like, really, bro? The common cold, the fever? We had Jordan play on a fever, dude. When was that? 96 NBA Finals. Like, come on, bro. Like, I'm looking at Brian Ortega and just realizing, man, like, he's not going to be champion. Champions don't do that. Champions overcome adversity no matter what. We can make excuses. We can do this and that. But at the end of the day, the true champions do not make excuses. They show up when they have to show up. And Brian Ortega pulled out. He pulled a Conor McGregor. We know McGregor, he's pulling out now. That's kind of strange, right? He's got, 4 kids now? McGregor never pulls out. And it's like he's pulling out all of a sudden now, dude, after 4 kids. Come on, Conor, man. Come back, please, dude. Like August, September time, somewhere around there. Like, we want to see McGregor back and fight Michael Chandler and Dust Chandler, but it's just like, man, dude, like, obviously McGregor's head is not in MMA right now. And look at Brian Ortega, like, just pulling out. It's crazy. But shout out to Diego Lopez getting the job done. And I'm telling you, he's on fire. Diego Lopez, he could very well get a title shot eventually in the next couple fights. I mean, he was on UFC 300, KO'd that dude on 300, and I was like, holy cow, who is Diego Lopez? Like, who is this guy? He looks feminine. He acts feminine during the weigh-ins, but come up to that fight night, I'm telling you, he's a dog. He's a pit bull in that octagon. So, shout out to Diego Lopez getting another job done. And then we got Anthony Smith versus Roman. I picked Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith got dominated. It was all Roman. Roman had over 100 significant strikes. And Anthony Smith only had 51 total strikes. And Roman was 1 for 3 for takedowns in this fight. Anthony Smith, he's been in the UFC for a while. I do think he should retire. I think it's time for Anthony Smith to retire, go into commentating like Dustin Poirier, Daniel Cormier, those type of ex-UFC fighters. It's just Anthony Smith, man. It's just he was just in there just kind of doing the motions, kind of picking up a paycheck. That's what it looked like for me. It didn't look like Anthony Smith was hungry at all. It didn't look like he was winning in the exchanges at all. It was just like Anthony Smith just showed up and literally was like, hey, I want to collect a check here. So, and that's what he did. But shout out to Roman getting the job done. And then we had Ian Gary versus Michael Page, the opener of the pay-per-view. And really, this was disappointing. I thought Ian Gary should have finished MVP Michael Page, and he didn't. This fight won by decision, barely. It should have been split decision. And honestly, I thought it really could have been an even fight. Could have been a draw. I mean, Michael Page had 52 total strikes to Ian Gary's 65 total strikes. But it looked like Michael Page's strikes really hit differently. They did. It looked like they did a little bit more damage. Ian Gary was just in there kind of doing the motions. I didn't really see anything spectacular from Ian Gary. I wasn't like, oh, man, Ian Gary's a legend, dude. Like, he fought so great. No. It was one of them fights where I'm like, man, like, Ian Gary's just kind of going through the motions. Some minutes in this fight, he was trying to survive, avoid Michael Page's crazy kicks, all this stuff, but it was just like nothing really stuck out to me where I'm like, man, Ian Gary is a freaking superstar in the UFC. No, that was not the case. It was just like, man, Ian Gary needs to go back to the drawing board and get better even in a stand-up game. Even though he did shoot for a couple takedowns in this fight, he had to do what he had to do to win the fight, but it was just a sloppy victory. It wasn't a clear victory where it's like, man, Ian Gary, you're up there in the top 5 at 170. No. It was just like, man, dude, it was like, and he wants to fight Colby Covington. It's just like, no, bro. Like, Ian Gary does not want that smoke whatsoever. I think Ian Gary needs to continue to fight and continue to win, but it's just like, man, like, the way Ian Gary talks, it's like, man, bro, like, you should have won by submission. You should have choked Michael Page out. He had the opportunity to do it. I think it was in the second round, maybe even in the first round. He had an opportunity to choke him out. I think it was the second round. And it was just like, wow. It was like you didn't get that either. So, yes, good victory by Ian Gary. But at the end of the day, I don't think Dana White and the UFC were like, really applaud by this. They were just like looking at it like, man, like it could have been a draw. It really could have been a draw, but shout out to Ian Gary getting the job done. The best fight all weekend with the ladies fight was the Macy Chasson versus Mayra Silva. This fight was crazy, and Silva was winning this fight up into the second round when Macy got a takedown. And when she got a takedown, she threw a crazy elbow that immediately cut Silva's eye. And above her eye, it looked like another eyelash, and it was just gushing out blood. You could see it immediately. And what was savage about that was Macy started to smile after she threw the shot, like she knew that she hurt Silva. She knew right then and there that, hey, that's what you get. That's what you get for throwing these crazy leg kicks, throwing the overhand rights. That's what you get. And Macy won by TKO, doctor stoppage, and it was the right call. A lot of MMA fans are like, oh, they should have let that fight go. No, that cut was so deep, especially for a woman's fight. It was just like, holy cow. Now, if this was a championship belt fight, that's a little different scenario. You might be able to let that go for that round and then eventually probably stop it. But at the end of the day, it was one of them things where it's like, it was the right call. It was. Macy split her whole forehead open, dude. It was gushing out blood immediately. I saw it as soon as she threw it, like 2 seconds after, I was like, holy cow, that cut immediately just came in right away. It was just like, holy cow. Macy started to smile. I was like, yeah, Macy's a savage. She's a savage. If this was, the past 100 years ago, Macy would be like a serial killer. Like, she just looked like a killer when she threw that elbow. It was just, and she started to smile after. It was like, oh my gosh, she's got the vibes of the serial killer. She really does. Like, that's insane. But shout out to Macy getting the job done. And I think that was plus money for her to win by TKO. It was probably like plus 300, maybe even more than that. They kind of doubted Macy. I think she was the underdog in this fight. It was kind of like a pick-em, but Macy came into the fight. She was ready. She was sharper than Silva, even though Silva's power was significantly more over Macy's. But at the end of the day, it was just her precision, her timing. Macy was tuned in, and she threw that great elbow that ended up stopping the fight. So shout out to Macy getting the job done. Only missed one fight in the main event card, and that was Anthony Smith. Not too mad about it, but Diego Lopez, I'm telling you right now, he went up in weight to 165. I think if Diego Lopez can fight at 155 as well, 155, even 170, I could see Diego Lopez fighting, but I think his best weight right now is 155. I think Lopez, him moving up in weight in this way, and he won by decision, against Dan, I think that's huge. I really do. So shout out to Diego Lopez, a name that we're going to be mentioning a lot in the future in the UFC. I think Diego Lopez is young, he's hungry, and he's only getting better, and he can knock people out cold. So I love that about Diego Lopez. And then with the main event, back to the main event, Alex Pereira beating Yuri. Yuri, what's next for him? Getting back to that belt, obviously, but getting back to the drawing board. I think Yuri needs to work on his defensive skills, defensive just whole strategy. He went into the fight with his hands down, and that's how Pereira capitalized on the leg kick. He understood the whole first round. He was calculating out the weaknesses in Yuri, understanding that he kept his hands down. And that's kind of how Yuri fights, and I knew that would be the death of Yuri. Keeping your hands down, it's like, dude, you got to keep your hands up against Pereira at all times. He throws high leg kicks, and they're sneaky, and he threw that left high leg kick on Yuri to sleep him, and he was immediately out. So I think what's next for Alex Pereira is definitely going up to heavyweight. I think Dana White and the UFC need to do this move. I think that it's going to be big business. People, MMA fans, would love to see Alex Pereira versus John Jones or Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall, something in that nature. I mean, we look at Alex Pereira. He gained like 25, 30 pounds overnight to this fight. Came in at 205, probably fighting at 235. So it's like, dude, Alex Pereira, he's ready for this. He's born for this. And I think him fighting at heavyweight's great. Now, obviously, I don't think he's going to fight John Jones right away. I think John Jones still wants Stipe. And then eventually he'll take these guys. He'll take Tom Aspinall or Alex Pereira. We look at John Jones and realize he's the most well-rounded UFC fighter of all time. He's the GOAT. He's great at everything. He's great at stand-up. He's great at leg kicking. He's great at the side leg kicks that he could utilize against Pereira if they do end up matching up. And obviously his wrestling background. So I just think overall, John Jones is the GOAT. I can't wait to see John Jones come back at the end of the year. But really some big UFC fights coming up at the Severe, I think in August or September time around there. And that's be interesting. Fighting in the Sphere, it's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I'd love to see McGregor versus Chandler at the Sphere. I don't think Dana White even came out with who's going to be on the Sphere card out in Vegas. But overall, it's just like, dude, I'd love to see Conor McGregor. Still the biggest draw in the UFC right now by the numbers for business-wise. I think, Conor needs to be back by sometime this year. If Conor McGregor does not fight by the end of the year, you could kind of say that Conor McGregor is done in the UFC. It's been over 3 years right now. He's rich. He's doing other things. He's not really training like he once was 10 years ago. Conor McGregor 10 years ago, back in 2014, was hungry, was living in the gym, was eating the gym, was training in the gym every single day, day in and day out, the hungry McGregor. And then McGregor, once he stopped to get hungry back in like 2017, 2018, that was the downfall of McGregor. It really was. McGregor's not hungry anymore, and do I blame him? No. He's got over $100 million in his bank account. Why would you be that hungry? Why would you show up to the UFC getting ready to get hit in the face? You wouldn't. That's why Conor McGregor pulled out. He wasn't 100%. I'd love to see McGregor, come back and fight in the Sphere at the end of the year. That'd be great. See John Jones come back. That's great. But I want to see Alex Pereira end up going up to heavyweight. If it's this year or next year, whether the two, even if he fights one more time at light heavyweight, I want to see Alex Pereira fight at heavyweight this time next year. I'd love to see it. But what UFC 303, what an event. Shout out to Dayton White. Shout out to the UFC. Shout out to Alex Pereira, the #1 pound for pound in my book. Alex Pereira right now in the UFC. It's the Clouded with Cab show. Let's go!